Hello dear children, good afternoon everyone, and once again welcome back you all to the online classes. And as you all know that now we are discussing about the 6th unit of your science part, that is universe, and already now we are discussing about the first chapter from this unit, that is Earth and the Moon. So this is the first unit what we are discussing now, and in this chapter already we have discussed many of the aspects, like we have learned about the surface of the moon, and also we have learned briefly about the phases of the moon, and also we have learned the effects, what are the effects of the moon on the earth. So already I have explained about the effects of the moon. So mainly there are two effects are there. One is the tides, the formation of tides, and the eclipses. So these are the two major effects of the moon on the earth. So in our previous class we have already learned about the tides, how the tides are formed, right? So tides are formed, tides are nothing but that is the rise in the oceanic water. The level of the water in the ocean rises and falls. So that we can the rise and fall in the oceanic water due to the gravitational force of the moon as well as the sun. So that we call as the tides, and there are two types are there in the tides. So they are the spring tides as well as neap tides. So about this we have learned in detail in our yesterday's class, and also I gave an attached video clip with that to understand better about how they are all formed, right? So you have learned about that, how the spring and neap tides are formed. So in our today's class we are going to discuss about the eclipses, how they form. There are two types of eclipses are there. One is the lunar eclipse and another one is the solar eclipse. So these are the two types of eclipses. We can observe it. Okay. So many a times we observe the lunar and the solar eclipses. Before going to study about these eclipses, you have to get an idea about the shadows. So if you know how the shadows are formed, so it will be very easier to you to understand the eclipses, how the eclipses are formed. So once if you learn about the shadows, because these eclipses are formed because of the shadows. objects as well as opaque objects. So these are the three types of objects that we study in the properties of matter, right? So transparent means it allows the light. Transparent objects allows the light which fall on it. So when it allows the light to fall on it, so we are not able to get any shadow of the transparent objects. For example, we just take the pure water or clean water. So clean water can transfer the light which is fall in it, so that we cannot able to see the shadow of the water. Or the air is present everywhere. So can we see the shadow of the air anywhere? No, because it is clear. So the transparent objects will never form the shadows. And if we take the translucent objects, it allows only the partial light. Allows only partial light to pass through them. It allows only partial, means only part of the light is allows to pass through them, and such objects we can call as the translucent objects. And the translucent object, we can see the shadows but not as dark as the opaque objects. We can able to see the shadows. And the opaque objects. These opaque objects does not allow the light to pass through them. Does not allow the light to pass through them. So these opaque objects, if you can take the wood, or you can take any cardboard, or you can take some of the plastic objects, so they will not allow the light to pass through them. You can take we also. Yes, we are also the opaque objects only. So we are also not allow the light to pass through us. So then we also called as the opaque only. So opaque objects, when they comes in between the source of light, they cut the path of the light, or they block the path of the light. So when they block the path of the light, they form the shadow on the surface, right? So you can see when you you can take a walk after the sunset of 1 or 2 hours. We can go to the street light. So street lights will be there. So just you can take a move from the street light. Just you stand the street light. Just you stand exactly straight to the light, the street light, and observe your shadow, where you can observe your shadow. And just you can little bit, you can move forward. Again you can observe your shadow, and again you take a move, and then again you can observe the shadow. So as you move away from the source of the light, your shadow size will go on increasing. Yes, the size of the shadow, it's go on increasing as you move away from the source of light. The same time, like the same way, you can also observe your shadow in the sunlight. So when the sun is at the overhead, it is in the noons. In the afternoon, the sun is at the overhead. So that time you just observe your shadow. It will be just fallen at your feet only. It is not longer. And if it go on the evening time, and when you observe your shadow in the evening time, the length is longer. The shadow size is longer. So that what we can say, when the source of light is far away from us, the shadow size will be longer. And when it is nearer to us, the size of the shadow will be smaller. So you can see in your textbook also. Yes. See here. You can see the shadows. So in this picture, you can able to see the shadow. So see, size of the shadow becomes bigger as one moves away from the source of light. So here the street light. It is just overhead and you can see the shadow here. So it is very small one. And just he comes just away from the source of light. Again there is an increase in the size. And again when he move again little more, so he can observe the shadow. It is longer. Right? So likewise, whatever the object it might be, so when it comes away from the source of the light, so we can see the longer shadows. Now we can discuss, we can understand what is shadow. Then shadow means what? Okay. So shadows are, I will give the definition, you just note it down in your notebook. It is the same will be there in your textbook also. Then also you can make a note. So when I tell you to write some notes, you just make it. Shadows are dark imprints of an opaque object that comes between the source of light and the surface on which the shadow forms, and the surface on which the shadow forms. Yes. So shadows are dark imprints. So dark means you can see whenever, whatever the color of the object it may be. So every day we wear the different colors of clothes. But what is the color of the shadow? Yes, it is black. So that is the reason we use the dark imprints. Dark means black only. So that shadows are dark imprints of an opaque object. We clearly mentioned here opaque object. So we can get the dark imprints when the opaque object comes between the source of light as well as the surface on which the shadow forms. So the shadows are dark imprints of an opaque object that comes between the source of light and the surface on which the shadow forms. Okay. So this is what the shadow. And in the above activity, the street light, what we can observe that when the object is away from the street light, the size is gone longer in size. And one thing we have to understand here clearly that the shadows are formed always opposite in the direction of the sunlight. Right? Suppose if it is the source of light, say candle. Yes, the candle is also a source of light. So, if suppose here is the object, yes, and this object is comes in the path of the light, so shadows are formed here. Right? So this is what in the opposite direction, when of the direction of the light. So there we can see the shadows. Okay. This is about the shadows, and now we can discuss the formation of the shadow. How the shadows are formed. Formation of shadows. And we all know that how the light travels. Yes, in the straight line. The light always travels in a straight path or in a straight line. So, whenever an opaque object comes in between the path of the light, for example, now we can take the source of light. Okay, so path. So when an opaque object comes in between the path. So this is the path of the light. So the light rays are traveling in this direction in the straight path. So when an opaque object comes in between the source of light, so we can observe the shadows here. Either it is the longer in size or it is smaller in size. That is depending on the distance between the source of light as well as opaque object. So this is the source of light and this is the opaque object and this is the, we can say, the screen. Okay, so always not screen, the surface. Okay, so here when the source of light, when an opaque object comes in between the source of light and the surface on which the shadow forms. So what happens here when the opaque object comes in between the path of light? It breaks the path or it blocks here. So the light rays will reach still here. So these light rays will not able to penetrate the opaque object. Means they will not able to move through the opaque object. So here the opaque object cuts the or it blocks the path of light. So only these rays can move here, but these rays cannot move here. Okay, so this opaque object, it breaks or it blocks the path of the light, so that when it breaks the path of light, the shadow is formed here. So this is how the shadows are formed, and when the opaque object is near to the sunlight or any source of light, so it will be smaller in size, and when it is away from the light source of light, the size will be longer. So naturally we can observe the shadows during the morning and in the early morning and in the evening. So we can observe the larger or longer shadows, and during the noons we can observe the shorter shadows. Means the size will be smaller during the afternoons. In the noons it will be smaller in size, the shadow will be smaller in size, and during the morning, early morning and in the evening, the shadows are longer in size. This is all due to the distance between the opaque object as well as the source of light. Right? Is it clear how the shadows are formed? And now we can discuss about the eclipses. Now you will be able to understand clearly about the eclipses, how they will form. And before that I will ask you some question. So just find out the answer for this. Some centuries back, concept of shadow was used to calculate the time. How? Just you can find the answer and tell me. And one more, the think and answer. It is there. It is given in your textbook. So that I will tell you now. So that is, observe the shadow of the astronauts falling on the ground. Are they similar or different? Why so? So it is given in your textbook, page number 256. You can observe in the page number 256 here. Yes. So here, from Apollo 17 TV transmission. Here, one man's shadow is shorter here and one is larger. Why it is like so? So this is because the one man may be in the higher on the ground and one man will be at the lower level in the ground. So this is the reason, the simple one. And now we can discuss about the eclipses. So after the explanation, I will also give the attached video clip. Eclipse. So this eclipse is the natural phenomenon, and they occur and they will give us a chance to study about the nature of the light. Yes, when the eclipses are formed, we can study is the nature of the light. And also these eclipses occurs due to the shadow formed because of the position of the moon, sun will be in the fixed position. It is because of the position of the moon and the earth relative to the sun. So when we observe the position of the moon and earth, so different types of shadows are formed here. So because of the shadows, we observe the two types of eclipses. One is solar eclipse and another one is lunar eclipse. So now the first thing we can discuss about the lunar eclipse. So this lunar eclipse is formed when lunar eclipse is formed when the earth comes between the sun and the moon. The sun and the moon. So when the earth comes between the sun and the moon, so they will be when they all comes in a straight line, or when the earth it comes between the sun and the moon, the shadow of the earth is fall on the moon. So now I will show you here. Suppose if it is the sun, yes, this is the sun and this will be the earth, yes, and this will be the moon. This is earth, this is sun and this is moon. So when it comes like this, when the earth is comes between the earth and when the earth is comes between the sun and the moon, so that time when the sunlight is the rays of the sun, so we know that about the concept of shadows. So this earth is also an opaque object, right? Our earth is also the opaque object. It also does not allow the sunlight to pass. So when the sun rays are moving here, right? So this earth being an opaque object, so when the rays are falling on the surface, it blocks the path and the shadow of the earth is fall on the moon. The shadow of the earth that is fall on the moon, and due to the shadow, sometimes it may be completely sometimes what happens, we may not observe the moon completely, and that we can call as the total lunar eclipse. Total lunar eclipse. So when the total lunar eclipse is occurs, so that time the shadow will be formed completely on the moon, so that we are not able to see the moon in the sky. And sometimes what happens, only the shadow will be formed on the part of the moon, only some part of the moon, so that we might have able to see the some part of the moon, and that we can call as the partial lunar eclipse. Partial lunar eclipse. So the partial lunar eclipse is formed when the shadow of the earth is fall on the moon, but still we can able to see some part of the moon. So that we can call as the partial lunar eclipse. And sometimes what happens, when the earth shadow is fall completely on the moon, we are not able to see the moon. So that we can call as the total lunar eclipse. Completely. The shadow will be formed on the moon, so we are not able to see the moon. That is total lunar eclipse. And this lunar eclipse takes place on the full moon night, but not on all the full moon nights. In some full moon nights, when it will comes closer, so likewise we can able to observe the lunar eclipse. And this lunar eclipse always form on the full the shadow of the earth falls on the moon. So that time it will cause the lunar eclipse. And next we can discuss about the solar eclipse. The second type of the eclipse, it is the solar eclipse. So when the solar eclipse is formed, so if you understand the lunar eclipse, you can able to say what is the solar eclipse. So when the solar eclipse is formed, yes, the solar eclipse is formed. The solar eclipse is formed when the moon, now when the moon comes between, when the moon comes between the sun and the earth, the sun and the earth. So now when the moon comes between the sun and the earth, so it forms the solar eclipse. So we also know that the moon is also an opaque object. This is also the non-luminous body like the planets. So it also don't have its own heat and light. So this is also an opaque object. The moon is also an opaque object. And since it is also the opaque object, when the light is fall on the moon, that will also form the shadow. So see what happened here. Again we can say this is the sun. Yes. And when the moon comes between the earth and the sun. So this is the moon and this is the earth. This is earth, this is moon and this is the sun. When the moon comes in between the sun and earth, so the sunlight will be falling on this, right? So sunlight. So this, we all know that the sun rays are always moving in a straight path, right? So this is the path of the light. And so sometime what happened? The part of the light. So sometime we can see when the moon comes between the earth and the sun, so sunlight will be falling like this, and the moon, when it blocks the path of the light, so it forms the shadow on it. And when the people who are there in this region, so they are not able to see the sun. Yes, when the moon formed the shadow on the earth, so what happened that time? The region where the people, and always the solar eclipse, it will not appear in the entire part of the earth. Only some regions we can able to see. So that time what happened? When the people, means the people who are there in this region, so for them the sun is not appears completely. So it will be observed like this, right? So some part of the light. So here it will be the dark patch. Yes, this will be the shadow, and I will show you the video also, so that you can able to understand it completely. So likewise, only the part of the sun we can see in the sky. So the people who are there in this region, so they can observe only the little part of the sun. And on that solar eclipse, it will be appear little darker than the usual days, right? And here this is not taken for a long period of time. It will be last for around 7 minutes and 31 seconds. 7 minutes and 31 seconds. So this solar eclipse, it will be last for 7 minutes and 31 seconds. And the solar eclipse is formed when the moon comes between the sun and the earth. So this is about the eclipses. So in the eclipse there are two types. One is lunar eclipse and another one is solar eclipse, and this is the effect of the moon on the earth. Right? So I hope you have understood this, and with this now I will show you how these eclipses are formed as well as how the shadows are formed. Now let me show that.
Shadow. The moon is visible from the earth because the moon reflects the sunlight. So you can see the reflection of the sunlight when the sunlight is falling on the moon. Shadows are dark shapes of an opaque object or a body that comes between a source of light and the surface on which the shadow falls. So if we can see the shadow of the globe here. Shadows are always formed in the direction opposite to the source of light. So you can see here how the shadows are formed. Shadows are formed because of the light travels in a straight line. An opaque object does not allow light to pass through. This forms an imprint of the object on the surface opposite to the light source, so that we can able to see the shadow. The farther the light source, the larger, the longer is the shadow made by the object. The smallest shadow is formed when the sun is exactly overhead. So we can say in the noons. A shadow is always a two-dimensional imprint of the object. Eclipse. An eclipse is a natural phenomenon that gives a unique opportunity to study and understand the effect of light in nature. So we can see the solar and lunar eclipses. It occurs due to the position and the shadows of the earth, the moon and the sun with respect to one another. Lunar eclipse. A lunar eclipse occurs when the earth comes in between the sun and the moon. The earth casts its shadow on the moon. Either the entire visible surface of the moon appears dark or a part of it appears dark. This we can call as the partial lunar eclipse. A lunar eclipse takes place only on a full moon night, but not on every full moon night. A total lunar eclipse can last for a duration of around 1 hour and 45 minutes. This is the duration of lunar eclipse. And the solar eclipse. A solar eclipse occurs when the moon comes in between the sun and the earth. The moon blocks the sun's light from falling on certain regions of the earth. The sun appears to be blocked by the moon for some time. So as you can see in the picture. So you can see the solar eclipse here. So we are unable to see the sun in the sky and the day appears a little dark for some time. So it will not take for a long time. A solar eclipse can last for around 7 minutes and 31 seconds. The solar eclipse occurs only on a new moon day, but not on every new moon day.
So this is all about the shadows and eclipses, and this is about your chapter, that is Earth and the Moon. So I hope you have understood all the aspects of this chapter, that is the surface of the moon as well as the effects of the moon, the tides as well as the eclipses and also the shadows. So I hope you have can contact me and clarify your doubts. Thank you.